car was in the repair shop from a hit-and-run collision in a parking lot. And so it's given us ample time to put about 1,000 miles or so on this current generation Altima. And this is a car that I was really relieved to drive for the first time when it launched. I felt like Nissan was showing some signs of trying again, trying hard again, trying in the way that they used to back in the days of the early 90s Nissan, Team 901 Nissan. Not quite to that level. Obviously, nothing that we get from Nissan or anyone else is going to approach quite that level. Different time, different age, different way of building cars, different way of marketing and selling cars. But after spending time with this car, I've got some impressions that I wanted to share, and they're largely favorable. If you want to cut to the chase on why you might not want to buy this car, the reasons are pretty few. The first is visibility, especially to the rear. I'm 6 foot 1 inch tall, and it's extremely difficult for me to see out the back of this thing day or night. I feel completely lost being behind the wheel, to the point of complete inadequacy, or sometimes fear or terror that I might be about to sideswipe something or cut someone off, or I find myself having to wave the "sorry I didn't see you" quite a bit, and I've got my mirrors set as well as one can possibly set mirrors. It's just the view out of the back is ridiculously inadequate, and at night that's especially problematic. I find myself driving like a motorcycle rider. Each time I switch lanes, I give the gas a firm squeeze and pray that no one else is doing the same thing in the next lane over. It's bad enough that I can't even see cars with their headlights on in the dead of night. So spend some time in this car at night, I'd say. The second thing is, when this thing hits a bump, certain types of bumps especially, like there, for example, nothing major, just surface imperfection. Tire pressures are spot on to the factory recommendation. Tires are all original, and these are high-profile tires. Now, having kind of a base car, who knows what changes beyond just wheel size and aesthetics when you go to an upmarket car, but all I can say is if you're getting this sort of entry spec version of the Altima, don't expect the ride to be placid over bumps the same way that, say, an Accord is, or even a Camry is. Those are the areas I think Nissan really has fallen down on, and the third being this infotainment system. Whether this is a one-off symptom of the car that I'm currently evaluating, or it is something endemic of the UX of the car, it's hard for me to say without spending more time in additional vehicles, but I find this thing extremely difficult to make adjustments on, to things like bass or treble, or to interact with CarPlay. If I turn the volume up while connected to CarPlay, the volume wants to go down, things like that. It's buggy. And it's not latency, it's not sort of press and wait, which I could forgive. It's, I don't know if you heard me, I don't know if this is possible at the moment. Things don't gray out and tell you they're not available, things seem to be available to you, but just impossible to actually summon or access, whether the vehicle is in motion or stopped. So I'd say those are the downsides of this car as I see them. Upsides of this car, the transmission and the engine, in fact, they pair incredibly well. And if you're someone who thinks that CVTs are bad or automatics are bad, spend some time with this particular combination of, I believe it's a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated with the CVT transmission with the most recent programming. And you'll see here as I pull away, you can feel the clutch kind of engage. There it is, fully engaged. So took until I was going about 20 miles an hour for full engagement and that gentle tip in. What I really like about this thing is you can spend the entirety of your driving cycle between 1 and 2,000 RPM, which obviously has a couple of benefits. Noise level. This thing is very quiet. Whether you're sailing down the freeway at 80 with the RPM hanging at about 2,000, or you're just going about your daily commute or errand running, it's rare that you feel the need for this car to exceed about 2,000 RPM when it's keeping up with traffic. And old CVTs had this habit of going to a high level in the power band and hanging there. I think what they've done with this CVT is they've said, let's try not to let it exceed 2,000 if possible. When I dig deeper and deeper into the throttle, it continues to kind of hang around that 2,000 RPM range. And it isn't really a motorboat feeling. It's more of a, back in the torque converter transmission days with high stall speed, you'd get kind of, the car would just motor forward on its V8 burble. This is no V8 burble, but it has that same sensation of wafting forward or sailing forward, or sort of a more of a aquatic maritime experience in that sense. But what's nice about this is when you actually give it some gas from a stoplight, it switches sort of from high to Jekyll. So that's a gear, right? That's pulling up through a gear. You can see the RPM as it accelerated. It was accelerating as though in a fixed ratio, and it'll do that through first, second, third, fourth, etc. Right? It feels like a transmission with fixed ratios in the situations where you don't want that wafting quietly forward, where you do want the sort of auditory feedback and visceral feedback of the car running through the gears. Is it faster that way? Probably not. Does it feel more satisfying than CVTs used to feel that way? Absolutely. So if this was paired with an engine that was a really unpleasant motor, that would also be a problem. That has been a problem with past CVTs as well. But I think they've done considerable work on the NVH and the internals in terms of the balancing and the weighting of the internals, because you gotta say that this thing, when the revs are up there, it'll get vocal, but not in an unrefined way, not in an uncultured way. It's kind of the way we remember our four cylinders being eager to please. So powertrain, I think, really fantastic combination. Overall, I'm averaging about 32 miles a gallon, and I do not drive gently. I've taken this thing up into Angeles Crest. I've taken this thing into the canyons. I've taken this thing on freeway excursions, about 80 miles an hour or so. Just city driving, a lot of urban in the daily LA mix over here. So for it to be averaging about 32 miles a gallon with my sort of more enthusiastic style of driving, granted I am pretty efficient with, it's rare I touch the brake unless necessary, so there is that, but an impressively efficient powertrain, and it motivates this car pretty smartly when necessary, and is really refined as well. So if you can't tell, I'm very charmed by the transmission and the programming. I think it does a lot to turn around perception on CVTs are bad and automatics are bad. It really is up there as on a high pedestal or a high podium with some of the better transmissions I've experienced and better powertrain combinations that I've experienced. So what does that leave? The front axle on this car has surprising amounts of grip in every version I've driven it in. It is not a car that succumbs to understeer quickly or readily or easily, and when you dial in more steering lock, when something comes up mid-corner, it somehow finds a little more grip than you were expecting. It's a really poised and balanced thing for a commuter machine. I don't think a lot of people are driving this or buying this because they really enjoy canyon carving, but from an active safety standpoint, from the car does what you want it to do when you need it to do it standpoint, really impressive. Thank you, Nissan. So much so that there have only been a couple of moments in time where I've actually gotten the traction or stability control light to blink. So the inherent grip and balance of the chassis is quite well done here. What else? Ergonomically, love the view forward, although I mentioned the view backwards leaves a lot to be desired. And, you know, seat comfort, pretty good. Active braking, right? Doesn't brake, only warns. I don't really understand any system that can say, hey, you're about to hit something, but doesn't take action. That's lost time if something is actually at the point where I need to be warned. I could use a hand at that moment. I don't understand the logic behind this other than cost cutting for obvious reasons, but really think that this should be kind of a mandate, and if anything else, like stability control, mandate it and have there be like settings or an off switch for people who don't really like the intervention. What else? I was not expecting a Tesla to pull into what I thought was a gas station. Turns out it's a car wash. They definitely do that. You know, easy controls, with the exception of these steering wheel controls, which I find myself hitting the wrong ones at nighttime than intended. The size and the shape of them makes them sort of encroach on each other's area in a weird way because it's been stylized. Let me give you an example of the transmission. There's a shift. There's a shift. Right? Really satisfying. And here we go, braking a bit. Have something in the back seat, so I didn't want to go too hard on the brakes. But as you can tell, that this car, for someone who's very critical about cars and very critical about the sort of averageness of the family sedan today, I'm not enamored with the Honda Accord. I'm frustrated by Honda Accord. I find this, in some ways, a more charming overall package than something as lofty as the Accord. The transmission and engine on the Accord doesn't really do it for me like this car does. The visibility forward on the Accord is almost as bad as the visibility backward on this car. So there are elements in this family sedan category, even among the benchmarks, that leave me very frustrated. So I find myself relatively charmed by this car. I think there are a few things that they could have thought of during development that would really have put this at the top level of the class, sort of unequivocally and universally. And I wish they would have done so, because it seems like Nissan has the right ingredients there. It just they've sort of stopped short of greatness. This feels like a car, when I use it 24/7, this feels like a car that was largely done in a sort of simulated environment. And the human factors, the whole built for a human race aspect of Nissan on certain points is missing, and that's what I find disappointing. It feels like, did anyone not sit down and actually use this car at night and see how difficult certain things are? And one last note on the night front. Kudos to Nissan for allowing me to turn off the screen with a long button press on this button here, and turn off the dash instrumentation entirely with the kind of rheostat on the left of the wheel. I can go full black panel on this car at night, and it's really wonderful to be able to do that in the modern age with all the screen overload and the LED and searing white light overload for night driving. So I'd like to see more of that from all car companies. If you've driven one of these cars, let me know what you think. Am I too gushing? Am I too critical of something like this, or this car in particular? I'd like to know, because these are just the thoughts of someone who is surprised at how information about cars is shared today and wants to do something about it.